Now identified the problem, gathered and evaluated disciplinary insights, and constructed a more comprehensive understanding. We arrive at the final step of the interdisciplinary research process, reflecting on, testing, and communicating the understanding. Let's break that down. First, reflection. This is where we take a step back and critically consider what we've actually learned, not just about the topic, but about the process. Did we grow in how we think across disciplines? Did we encounter unexpected challenges or moments where integration deepened our understanding? We also reflect on what we left out. Were any steps compressed or skipped? Were our own biases present? And how did our limited knowledge of certain disciplines shape the final outcome? Second, we move to testing the understanding. This isn't a simple pass or fail moment. It's about rigor. Does our new understanding work better than any single disciplinary explanation? Does it offer actionable insights? Is it coherent, balanced, and well integrated? We can also apply formal tests like the Newell test for utility, the Szostak test for explanatory depth, or the Boix Mansilla rubric for integration and critical reflection. And third, we communicate. Interdisciplinary research doesn't stop at the conclusion of the project. It must be shared. That could mean creating a metaphor, a model, a narrative, or even a new product or policy proposal. But the goal is to clearly express your integrated understanding in a way that's accessible and valuable to others, including the disciplines you borrowed from. Ultimately, this final step is about closing the loop, looking back, validating the quality of your work, and then offering it forward to the scholarly and real-world communities that can benefit from it. Reflection is a central part of any research process, but it holds special significance in interdisciplinary work. In this context, reflection is a self-conscious activity, a deliberate process of looking inward to examine why certain choices were made throughout the project and how those choices shaped the final outcome. As Szostak emphasizes, this isn't just an academic ritual. It's an opportunity to explain the decisions behind your research design, identify what worked, what didn't, and why. Interdisciplinarians, in particular, must be able to enter the specialized scholarly discourse of the disciplines they've drawn from, and do so in a way that is both interesting and persuasive. This includes being prepared to explain or defend aspects of the work that may challenge disciplinary norms or raise concerns among disciplinary audiences. While reflection should ideally happen throughout the research process, it's essential at the end. It helps us finalize our understanding by making sense of not only the results, but the path we took to get there. There are 4 key areas we're asked to reflect on. 1. What has actually been learned, both in terms of content and in terms of the process. 2. Steps that were omitted or compressed, and the reasons behind those adjustments. 3. Our own biases, both conscious and unconscious, and how they may have influenced the outcome. And 4. Our limited understanding of the relevant disciplines, theories, and methods, because no one is an expert in every field, and acknowledging this strengthens the integrity of the work. Through this kind of honest reflection, we not only improve the quality of our final product, we also grow as interdisciplinary thinkers. At this stage, we pause to reflect on what has actually been learned, both in terms of content and process. This means asking, what did we learn about the topic itself, and what did we learn about the way we approached it? On the content side, we consider whether our interdisciplinary integration led to a richer, deeper, or more nuanced understanding of the problem. As Boix Mansilla and colleagues put it, we should ask, was it worth the effort? If your final understanding reflects the successful integration of disciplinary insights in a meaningful way, the answer is likely yes. On the process side, reflection involves thinking about how the project was structured, how it progressed, and what went well or poorly along the way. Were there any challenges with organizing the work or collaborating across disciplines? What role did the interdisciplinary process itself play in shaping the outcome? It's also important to think about how knowledge was shared throughout the project, both disciplinary and interdisciplinary. How did those exchanges influence the direction of your work? Were there key moments when a disciplinary insight changed how you saw the problem? What conditions helped create those aha moments, and how can we design future research to encourage them? By reflecting on what you learned and how you learned it, you build not only a better final product, but also a better understanding of how to approach complex problems in the future. Let's be honest, most interdisciplinary projects don't follow every step in the research process exactly as outlined in the book. And that's okay. What matters is that we recognize and reflect on those deviations thoughtfully. There are many reasons why steps might be omitted or compressed. Maybe you weren't able to fully complete a step due to time constraints or limited resources. Maybe you found it more efficient to combine steps, like merging your literature review with the identification of disciplinary perspectives. Or perhaps you integrated steps out of sequence because of how your project evolved. Whatever the case, it's essential to acknowledge and explain these choices. Did you skip a step entirely? Restructure the process? Compress 2 or more steps into one? If so, reflect on why you did it, and more importantly, describe how these changes might have impacted your final product. For example, skipping step 5, developing adequacy in a discipline, might mean you overlooked important theories or methods. Or compressing steps 8 and 9 could lead to a weaker integration if you didn't fully resolve conflicts between insights. By explicitly stating where and why the process diverged from the book's structure and evaluating the cumulative effect of those choices, you show both intellectual honesty and methodological awareness. And that strengthens the credibility of your work. Every researcher brings biases to the table, and this is especially true in interdisciplinary work, where personal experience often influences how we frame the problem, which disciplines we rely on, and how we interpret their insights. A key principle of interdisciplinary research is the recognition that no method is flawless and no researcher is entirely objective. If we accept that, then we also have to accept that our conclusions may be shaped, at least in part, by our own biases. Szostak highlights the importance of actively reflecting on those biases. This isn't about eliminating perspective or pretending we're neutral. It's about metacognition, thinking about how we think, and making sure we're being fair, balanced, and evidence-based. Here are a few questions to guide your reflection. Why was I drawn to this problem in the first place? Did I choose certain expert perspectives because they aligned with what I already believed? Was I more comfortable using insights from familiar disciplines simply because I knew them better? These questions help us uncover hidden influences on our work. For example, a student writing about leadership might unintentionally favor certain traits in their ideal manager that reflect personal preferences rather than evidence from multiple disciplines. The point here isn't to discredit your work, it's to strengthen it. Recognizing your biases helps you build a more honest and defensible final product, and it also makes you a stronger thinker overall in research and in life. So take the time to step back, interrogate your own assumptions, and make sure they aren't steering your research in a narrow direction. That's how we grow as interdisciplinary scholars. None of us are experts in every discipline we draw from. One of the hallmarks of strong interdisciplinary research is being honest about the limits of your own disciplinary knowledge. As Boix Mansilla points out, recognizing those limits is not a weakness. It's a sign of academic maturity and a strength that enhances the credibility of your work. Even if you've achieved adequacy in understanding key disciplinary insights, theories, and methods, you're unlikely to have a practitioner-level grasp of all of them. That's especially true when working across multiple fields. Interdisciplinary research requires breadth, but we should never pretend that this breadth replaces the depth of a disciplinary expert. Szostak urges us to reflect on how our limited understanding might have shaped our choices. For example, did we overestimate the value of a theory simply because it was easier to understand? Did we overlook the significance of a method because it came from a less familiar field? Did we undervalue or misapply a concept because we lacked full context? It's also important to reflect on how well the disciplines intertwine, how their perspectives fit together or clash. Your final product may reflect tensions or gaps between fields, and acknowledging those areas of uncertainty shows scholarly integrity. In your conclusion, follow the lead of professional researchers. Be upfront about the limitations of your understanding. Point out any areas where your work might have underestimated or overestimated particular insights. This doesn't undermine your results. It reinforces that your integration was thoughtful and self-aware. At its core, interdisciplinary work is about the deliberate intertwining of disciplinary perspectives. That means evaluating contributions critically, acknowledging their limitations, and being transparent about how your own understanding evolved and where it may still fall short. What should students gain from engaging in interdisciplinary research? The learning outcomes for interdisciplinary work go beyond mastering content. They reflect a deeper shift in how we think. These outcomes distinguish interdisciplinary learning from that of any single discipline and focus on the cognitive capacities students build throughout the process. The first key outcome is tolerance for ambiguity and paradox. Interdisciplinary problems are often complex, with no clear-cut solutions. Learning to sit with uncertainty and still move forward thoughtfully is a powerful outcome in itself. Second, critical thinking. While all disciplines value critical thinking, interdisciplinarity takes it a step further. It requires you to distinguish assumptions from arguments, arguments from evidence, and to evaluate conflicting perspectives. You must compare these differing views and ultimately reach a reasoned conclusion that integrates them. Third, a balance between subjective and objective thinking. Interdisciplinary researchers learn to navigate personal experience while still grounding their conclusions in evidence and logic. It's not about eliminating bias entirely, it's about managing it. Fourth, demythologizing expertise. Interdisciplinary students begin to see that no one discipline or expert has all the answers. This fosters intellectual humility, while also empowering students to engage more confidently in scholarly conversations. Fifth, asking new questions. Perhaps most importantly, interdisciplinary learning increases your ability to see problems in new ways. It helps you recognize gaps, ask different kinds of questions, and come up with novel solutions. And sixth, drawing on multiple methods. Students improve their ability to identify appropriate tools from different fields and apply them with flexibility. These outcomes reflect the essence of interdisciplinary learning: the development of integration, evaluative judgment, and the ability to generate new insights. If your project helped you do any of this, you've already achieved something meaningful, far beyond the content alone. One of the most powerful outcomes of interdisciplinary learning is the development of a set of advanced cognitive abilities. These go beyond memorizing facts or reviewing theories. They reflect your capacity to think with knowledge, to use what you've learned in flexible, creative, and applied ways. There are 5 core cognitive abilities that interdisciplinary work helps develop. 1. Perspective taking. This involves understanding and valuing different viewpoints, especially those grounded in different disciplinary frameworks. It teaches us empathy for intellectual diversity. 2. Structural understanding of complex problems. You begin to see problems not just as isolated issues, but as systems, interconnected, layered, and influenced by multiple forces. 3. Creation of common ground. This is where you work to reconcile differences between disciplines. You identify shared assumptions, language, or frameworks that can serve as a bridge. 4. Integration of conflicting insights. Rather than choosing one viewpoint over another, you learn to bring them together in ways that create a more coherent and inclusive understanding. 5. Cognitive advancement. This is the capstone ability. It means applying what you've learned to create something new. A novel insight, an original solution, a reframed question, or a product that solves a real problem. This cognitive advancement is what Repko and Szostak refer to as a more comprehensive understanding. It rests on 4 key premises. First, it's performance-based. You don't just have knowledge, you can use it in new and meaningful contexts. As Boix Mansilla explains, this means being able to apply ideas flexibly and communicate them effectively. Second, it's disciplined. This kind of understanding is grounded in genuine disciplinary knowledge, not just opinions or common sense. Third, it's integrative. Insights from various fields are not just laid side by side. They actively inform one another to enhance your overall understanding. And finally, it's purposeful. The interdisciplinary understanding leads to something practical and meaningful, like an explanation, a product, a policy recommendation, or a new question. Like all good research, it must be communicated clearly to be useful. In short, cognitive advancement is not just the outcome of interdisciplinary work. It's also the proof that interdisciplinary thinking has taken place. Once completed our interdisciplinary project and reflected on what we've learned, the next step is to test the more comprehensive understanding we've developed. This is a formal and structured process, distinct from reflection, even though it may involve elements of self-evaluation. Testing in interdisciplinary research looks different from disciplinary testing. In a single discipline, testing typically involves applying that field's preferred methods to its preferred forms of data. But as Repko and Szostak explain, interdisciplinary researchers can't rely on just one method. Our understanding spans multiple fields, so our testing needs to be multifaceted as well. To do this, we use a strategy called triangulation, drawing on multiple types of evaluation to reduce bias and to increase confidence in the results. This gives us a more well-rounded sense of whether our integrated understanding holds up. There are 4 ways to test an interdisciplinary understanding, and they fall into 2 broad categories. 3 of the tests focus on the results of the integration and ask these questions. 1. Was the outcome useful? For example, does it offer viable policy implications? 2. Does the outcome represent an improvement over existing disciplinary explanations? 3. Does it add something original to the conversation? Perhaps a new insight, framework, or approach? The 4th test shifts the focus to the process and asks, was the integration done appropriately? Were insights selected and combined using a clear and rigorous method? Together, these tests help us evaluate what we produced and how we produced it. Testing is essential because interdisciplinary work often challenges conventional wisdom. It pushes boundaries. So we need to be sure that our conclusions are not only innovative, but also well-founded and justifiable. In short, testing is the final academic check before we move on to communicating our results to others. It confirms that the understanding we've built is valid, credible, and ready to enter broader scholarly and public conversations. The Newell test is one of the most widely used methods for evaluating the quality of an interdisciplinary understanding. It focuses on two things: utility and process. Let's start with utility. Newell asks us to evaluate whether the final understanding we've developed is useful, not just intellectually interesting, but actionable. In other words, does it help solve a real-world problem? Does it answer the research question in a way that's meaningful? Can it inform public policy, guide practitioners, or support decision-making in the real world? This is an important standard for interdisciplinary research, which often targets complex, applied problems. If your conclusion doesn't seem useful to anyone, if it lacks practical value, Newell suggests you may need to revisit your integration or your disciplinary sources. But Newell also emphasizes how you arrived at your understanding. Was the process rigorous? Did you perform each step thoughtfully and thoroughly? A common failure is to move too quickly from disciplinary insights to integration without clearly identifying the connections between them. You must be able to show how the insights relate, how the variables, concepts, or frameworks interact to form a cohesive whole. In short, the Newell test challenges us to consider whether the final understanding is useful and whether the integration was done in a careful, systematic way. If you can confidently answer yes to both, you're likely on the right track. The test brings our attention to a critical, but sometimes overlooked, part of the interdisciplinary research process: communication. According to Tress and colleagues, an understanding doesn't truly become research until it's communicated, until it moves from tacit knowledge that lives inside your head to explicit knowledge that others can access, critique, and build upon. This transformation happens when your work is written, published, presented, or shared with a broader academic or professional audience. One of the most important questions this test asks is, have you made your integrated understanding visible and available to others? Tress and colleagues emphasize that your findings only become research when you take the final step of organizing, analyzing, and sharing that knowledge in a way that others, especially those in the scientific and academic communities, can evaluate and respond to. They also encourage us to ask, is this work interesting and relevant to others in the field? Will other scholars, practitioners, or decision-makers want to engage with it? Have I communicated my findings in a way that allows others to use or build upon them? This means your research needs to be accessible, whether that's through a journal article, a policy brief, a documentary, or even a well-designed website. The medium doesn't matter as much as the message being clear, coherent, and available. So, the Tress test reminds us that interdisciplinary research only reaches its full potential when it contributes to broader knowledge creation, and that contribution begins with thoughtful, intentional communication. The Szostak test is one of the most thoughtful and flexible methods for evaluating an interdisciplinary understanding. It consists of two parts: a basic test for all types of projects, and a more advanced, holistic version for policy-oriented research. Let's start with the basic test, which asks two key questions. 1. Is the new understanding better than no understanding at all? This is a foundational question. even if your integrated insight is imperfect, is it still an improvement over having no synthesis or explanation? What does it add? 2. Does it offer a superior explanation compared to disciplinary alternatives? This is the more advanced question. Critically compare your interdisciplinary understanding to individual disciplinary perspectives. Ask yourself, does my explanation clarify causal relationships better? Does it draw on broader evidence or offer more actionable insight? If your integrated understanding improves on these areas, you've passed this part of the test. Now let's move to Szostak's holistic test, which is useful for policy-focused projects. It asks a deeper set of questions to ensure that your understanding is not only clear and integrative, but also responsible and well contextualized. Here are the 4 holistic questions. 1. Does the analysis acknowledge possible negative side effects of implementing the understanding? Think about unintended consequences. What could go wrong if your insight were applied? 2. Does the analysis account for the full range of causal relationships? Have you considered all the important variables, systems, and stakeholders involved? 3. Is the understanding adequately contextualized? That means, is it grounded in the cultural, historical, institutional, or ecological realities that shape the problem? And 4. Would policymakers find it useful? If the audience includes decision makers, is your work accessible, relevant, and applicable to their needs? This holistic version of the Szostak test is especially valuable when you're working on real-world problems, where the stakes are high and oversimplification can be dangerous. To summarize, the basic Szostak test helps you measure the strength and originality of your understanding. The holistic test goes a step further to ensure it's responsible, complete, and practically useful. Together, they help interdisciplinary researchers hold their work to a high standard of intellectual and ethical rigor. The Boix Mansilla test provides a structured way to evaluate interdisciplinary work, especially in academic settings. It's built around a rubric that identifies 4 defining qualities of high-quality interdisciplinary understanding. Whether you're evaluating your own project or an instructor is grading student work, this rubric offers clear and meaningful standards. Let's break down the 4 core criteria. 1. Purposefulness. This refers to the clarity of the project's goals and audience. A purposeful interdisciplinary project should do 3 things. First, clearly define the problem in a way that invites multiple disciplinary perspectives. Second, offer a strong rationale for taking an interdisciplinary approach. This links to steps 1 and 2 of the research process. And third, use an appropriate genre or communication strategy for its intended audience, whether that's policymakers, educators, or the general public. So ask yourself, does my framing of the problem naturally require interdisciplinary insight? Have I clearly communicated the purpose of my project to my intended audience? The second criteria is disciplinary grounding. This refers to your ability to work accurately and thoughtfully within the disciplines you draw from. This is linked to steps 3, 4, and 5. Strong disciplinary grounding does these 2 things. First, effectively uses of each discipline's concepts, methods, and communication style. Second, provides a clear understanding of how those disciplinary insights were selected and applied. So ask yourself, did I use disciplinary theories, findings, or examples accurately? Did I apply each discipline's preferred methods appropriately? Methods like data analysis, philosophical reasoning, or textual interpretation. The third criteria is integration. This is at the heart of interdisciplinary research. and it's what sets your work apart. Integration means identifying where insights from different disciplines overlap, contrast, or complement each other, and creating something new from that combination. This aligns with steps 8, 9, and 10. Boix Mansilla's rubric recommends asking these 4 questions. First, did I bring in relevant insights from at least 2 disciplines? Second, did I use a strategy to connect those insights, like a model, metaphor, or visual framework? Third, is there balance in how I treat the disciplines, so one doesn't dominate or distort the others? And fourth, did integration lead to a new, more advanced understanding? The fourth and final criteria is critical awareness. The project should reflect a deep, thoughtful awareness of its own strengths and limitations. Strong interdisciplinary thinkers can weigh disciplinary options carefully, adjust their integration strategy when needed, and recognize where their understanding is incomplete or where more research is needed. So ask yourself, am I aware of the limits of the disciplines I used? Have I explained how and why I combined them the way I did? To summarize, the Boix Mansilla rubric isn't just about getting a grade. It's a powerful tool for self-evaluation. If your project scores well across all 4 areas, purposefulness, disciplinary grounding, integration, and critical awareness, then you've achieved something truly valuable. By now, we've reviewed 4 rigorous ways to test an interdisciplinary understanding: the Newell test, the Trest test, the Szostak test, and the Boix Mansilla rubric. But testing isn't about finding the right method. Instead, it's about using multiple tests in combination to make sure your final product is strong, credible, and complete. To do that, you'll want to consider these 7 key indicators of quality, drawn from across all 4 testing approaches. 1. Usefulness. Ask yourself, does this understanding help solve a real-world problem? If your work has value for practitioners, policymakers, or the public, that's a strong sign of its utility. 2. Disciplinary grounding. Have you achieved adequacy in each of the disciplines you used? Have you clearly identified how those disciplines connect to each other and to the overall understanding? 3. Integration. Does your project synthesize different perspectives? Are you clearly showing how those viewpoints were combined and why the combination led to a better understanding? 4. Process clarity. Have you explained how the project unfolded? This includes what went well, what steps were challenging or skipped, and how you adjusted your approach along the way. 5. Comparison. Can you show that your interdisciplinary insight is better than any single disciplinary alternative? This might include offering a broader explanation, resolving contradictions, or identifying patterns others missed. 6. Self-reflection. Do you show awareness of your project's limits? Have you acknowledged where disciplinary gaps, time constraints, or bias may have shaped the final product? 7. Communication. Have you shared your work in a way that invites peer feedback? Knowledge becomes research when it's made public and evaluated. That means clearly presenting your results, whether in writing, speaking, or media, and inviting others to respond. To summarize, testing your interdisciplinary understanding isn't about passing a checklist. It's about raising the quality of your work. These 7 indicators help ensure that what you've created is more than just a project. It's a meaningful contribution to solving a complex problem. When you finish testing, you're ready for the final part of Step 10, communicating your results back to the disciplines and the wider world. This is where everything you've worked on, your insights, your integration, and your testing comes together into a final product you can share. But this isn't just about turning in a paper. It's about ensuring your understanding is clear, coherent, and meaningful to your intended audience. To do that, your work should demonstrate 3 key qualities. First, unity. All the pieces of your understanding should feel like they belong together. Each theory, method, or concept you used should contribute to the final explanation without overpowering the others. Your work should also demonstrate coherence. Your ideas should flow logically. The reasoning behind your integration should be easy to follow, and your conclusions should feel like a natural outcome of your research process. And third, balance. No single discipline or viewpoint should dominate. Instead, your work should reflect a thoughtful and fair use of each perspective you've drawn on. One way to test whether you've achieved unity, coherence, and balance is to translate your integrated understanding into something accessible, like a metaphor, model, or narrative. These tools help communicate complex ideas in ways that are easier to grasp and more compelling. For example, a model can help visualize how different disciplines interact. A metaphor might capture the essence of your integration. A story or anecdote could illustrate your conclusion in a memorable human way. Your final product could take many forms: a research paper, a policy proposal, a presentation, an infographic, or even a podcast. What matters most is that it makes your insight real and relevant to others. Remember, integration is only powerful if it's shared. So as you wrap up your interdisciplinary project, ask yourself these questions. Is my work unified and balanced? Have I made my insights understandable and engaging? Will this reach the people who need to hear it? If the answers are yes, then you've not only completed Step 10, you've fulfilled the purpose of interdisciplinary research. As we wrap up Step 10, let's take a closer look at one of the most powerful tools for communicating interdisciplinary understanding: metaphors. A metaphor can do more than just clarify an idea. It can capture the essence of your integration. It allows you to express complexity in a way that resonates with your audience. A powerful example is Maya Lin's design of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. She envisioned it as a scar in the earth, symbolizing both trauma and healing. While the metaphor doesn't fully explain the war, it frames the emotional landscape in a way that blends history, memory, and grief. It's interdisciplinary, whether we name it that or not. In your own work, a well-chosen metaphor can serve as an integrative device, a way to bring together disciplinary insights and expose patterns that might otherwise stay hidden. According to Repko and Szostak, an effective metaphor should reflect 3 consistencies. 1. The disciplinary insights you've used and modified to create common ground. 2. The interdisciplinary linkages you've built and how the parts connect. And 3. The patterns or dynamics of the broader system you're explaining. Metaphors are especially useful when your project deals with ambiguity or unresolved tensions. Unlike a list or a diagram, a metaphor holds space for both clarity and complexity at the same time. It helps you say, "This is how it works and how it feels." There are different types of metaphors. You might choose to use a visual metaphor, like a bridge or a mosaic, or a narrative metaphor, like a journey, ecosystem, or symphony, or a physical representation, an art piece, object, or design that embodies your findings. In interdisciplinary research, metaphors do more than explain, they reveal. They let your audience grasp the integration intuitively and emotionally. So if your final understanding still feels abstract or fragmented, try asking yourself, what does this remind me of? What does it look or feel like in another context? What symbol could capture the tension, unity, or change I've uncovered? That symbol might be the most compelling way to express your interdisciplinary insight. Another excellent way to express your interdisciplinary understanding is by creating a model, a structured representation that visually or physically captures your thinking. A model is more than just a diagram. It's a tangible expression of how your integration works. It could be a visual diagram or flowchart, a physical object, a performance or creative artifact, or even a written framework that serves as a guide for others. The strength of a model is that it makes your thought process visible and shareable. It helps your audience understand how you move from complex disciplinary insights to a unified explanation. For example, consider Nade's model of sustainable development in Costa Rica. It visually balanced environmental, cultural, and economic dimensions. By doing this, it helps stakeholders see how these different priorities interact and how they can be addressed together in practice. A strong model often reflects three key features, including unity, by showing how different insights fit together in one system, coherence, by clarifying relationships between ideas, and balance, by ensuring no one disciplinary viewpoint dominates or overshadows the others. Models also serve as teaching tools. When well designed, they allow others to follow your logic, replicate your structure, or apply your ideas to new problems. You don't have to be an artist or designer to create a good model. Whether it's a chart, a metaphorical map, or a conceptual framework, the goal is to give form to your understanding so others can interact with it. If you're struggling with how to present your final integration, ask yourself these questions. What structure would help others grasp the key relationships I discovered? How can I represent the movement, tension, or balance between ideas? Could a simple sketch or diagram clarify what words can't fully explain? So just remember that a thoughtful model can turn a complex idea into something concrete and memorable. Our integrative device is one of the most familiar and the most powerful, the narrative. Humans are wired for stories. We understand the world through beginnings, middles, and ends. So when you're presenting your interdisciplinary understanding, a narrative can help your audience follow your thought process and care about it. A narrative can take many forms. A short vignette that illustrates a key insight, a longer account of your research journey, or a real-world story that shows how your solution could play out in action. What makes narrative so effective is that it blends emotion and logic. It not only explains your integrated insight, it convinces others of its relevance and usefulness. Take J. Lewis' work on public education, for example. Instead of just analyzing policies, he told the stories of students, teachers, and families navigating systemic barriers. That narrative brought abstract data to life and made his argument personal and persuasive. In your own work, narratives can show how different disciplinary insights came together, how the complexity of the problem affected real people, or how your own perspective evolved during the process. To help you craft a narrative, ask yourself, what story best conveys the value of this integration? Who is affected by the issue, and what is their lived experience? How did my journey of discovery change the way I think about the problem? And remember, the purpose of a narrative isn't just to explain your results. It's to persuade your reader or listener that your understanding has meaning, and maybe even the power to change something. Whether short or long, formal or informal. Narratives help turn academic insight into something relatable, memorable, and most importantly, usable. Sometimes an interdisciplinary project doesn't just lead to a new understanding, it leads to a new process. This means creating a repeatable, practical approach that others can use to solve real-world problems. For example, Delft's proposal to combine forensic psychology with forensic science in homicide investigations shows how interdisciplinary thinking can lead to a method that practitioners can apply immediately. A new process is a way of translating your understanding into action. It's not just theoretical. It's useful in clearly defined situations and often aimed at specific audiences, like professionals or policymakers. Think of it as a tool. It simplifies complexity and provides a practical path forward. Processes may offer new ways of solving recurring challenges or introduce innovative analytical frameworks that lead to fresh insights. So when your project results in a new process, it's a sign that your research has moved beyond explanation to real-world application. Your final product might take many forms: a tool, a performance, a work of art, or even a digital platform. What matters is that it reflects your integrated understanding and communicates it in a way that's useful and accessible to others. Interdisciplinary products aren't just about ideas, they're about action. Whether it's a sculpture that conveys emotional insight or an app that solves a common problem, the end result should be immediately useful, grounded in disciplinary knowledge, and clearly shaped by the integration process. Artistic formats, in particular, can capture meaning that's hard to express in words, things like emotions, intuitions, and lived experience. Whatever form your work takes, it should demonstrate that your thinking was interdisciplinary from beginning to end. Another powerful form of interdisciplinary understanding is a critique. You can use your integrated insight to analyze an existing policy and reveal how it's falling short, often because it was shaped by a narrow disciplinary lens. Szostak's critique of one-size-fits-all economic growth models shows how such limited thinking can miss critical social or environmental concerns. But a critique isn't just about pointing out flaws. It can also lead to better solutions. By drawing on multiple perspectives, you can propose a new policy, plan, or framework that's more inclusive and more likely to meet the complex needs of real-world problems. Some of your most meaningful contribution is not an answer, but a question. Because interdisciplinary research happens at the edges of disciplines, it's uniquely positioned to identify gaps in existing knowledge. These gaps often inspire new lines of inquiry or fresh research questions. Scholarly research is a conversation. Your job is to build on what others have done and invite them to build on your work in return. In fact, a study that claims to answer everything might gain little traction because it leaves no room for the next step. A truly valuable contribution is one that advances understanding while opening new doors for others to explore. A key part of interdisciplinary work is communicating your insights back to the disciplines. This isn't just about courtesy, it's about impact. When you publish in disciplinary journals, use their terminology, and connect your insights to the kinds of questions they care about, you help disciplines grow. You show how interdisciplinary thinking can enhance their understanding of complex problems and encourage greater openness and flexibility. There are 5 key indicators that your communication is adding value. 1. It highlights the benefits of integrating disciplinary insights to produce new understanding. 2. It supports theoretical and methodological flexibility. 3. It acknowledges that each theory has limits and specific contexts where it applies. 4. It encourages integrating a wide range of empirical analyses within a unified framework. And 5. It helps disciplines rethink and possibly expand how they approach certain issues. This process isn't easy. To be taken seriously, you must ground your work in the discipline's literature, use its language, and show how your interdisciplinary insight helps answer the kinds of questions that matter to that field. Done well, this can make your work more influential and spark lasting change within the disciplines themselves.